Welcome, everyone. We will now make this a multilingual space with interpreters from TLC. Take it away, Annette.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to today's meeting. My name is Annette, and I am with my interpreting partner, Jessica, supporting language access. I will be making this announcement in English and Spanish. Hola y bienvenidos a la reunión de hoy. Mi nombre es Annette y estoy aquí con mi compañera de interpretación, Jessica, para apoyar con el acceso a idiomas. Anunciaré este mensaje en inglés y en español. We invite everyone to select their language of choice and be part of this multilingual space. Please select English if you have limited Spanish proficiency. For those of you who will be speaking in English, kindly remember to speak at a moderate pace because we do use 30% more words in Spanish to convey the message as in English. If you're on the computer, at the bottom, you'll see a globe that says interpretation in just a moment. Put a check mark on English if you need to hear the Spanish to English. If you are on your cell phone or tablet, locate the three dots, put a check mark on English and hit done. This last step is very important to activate and begin the interpretation. Unfortunately, interpretation will not work on Chromebooks or if you're dialing into the meeting. Please make sure your app is updated. Reminder, if you see an interpreter raise their hand, kindly make sure to speak slower. Les invitamos a todos a seleccionar su idioma de preferencia para poder formar parte de este espacio multilingüe. Seleccione español si está limitado en su dominio del inglés. Si está en su computadora, habrá un globito blanco en la parte inferior de su pantalla que dice interpretación, donde podrá seleccionar español. Ponga una palomita en español para poder escuchar de inglés a español. Si está usando su celular o tableta, ubique los tres puntitos y ponga una palomita en español y seleccione Done o finalizar. Este último paso es muy importante para activar la interpretación. Lamentablemente, la interpretación, esta función no trabaja con Chromebook o si llamó para ingresar a la reunión de Zoom. Asegúrese de actualizar su aplicación. Gracias. Thank you. Please activate interpretation.
Thank you. Gracias. Welcome. I'm Andrea Ritchie. I'm the co-founder with Mariame Kaba of Interrupting Criminalization, an initiative we started in 2018 to support folks working to interrupt criminalization. I am a light-skinned Black woman with curly hair, wearing glasses, a No More Police t-shirt, and lipstick by Shira Hassan, our transformative justice help desk operator and fellow at Interrupting Criminalization. Welcome to the fourth. I'm also, coming to you from the lands of the Tongva and Gabrielino peoples outside of Los Angeles. Welcome to the fourth and final event in the No More Police series. We have hosted 4 events, and the recordings of those events can be seen on our website and also will be dropped in the chat. They included an event on how not to be a propagandist for folks working in journalism and shaping narratives around safety. There was an event co-sponsored with Haymarket Press on abolition and the state. And we last fall had an event focused on the chapter of No More Police called We Are Survivors. And then today's event called No Soft Police, focusing on that chapter of the same name in No More Police, is the fourth and final event. And for folks who are asking, yes, we will be recording. So as movements to divest from policing and invest in greater community safety and well-being have grown over the past 2 years, the past 2 decades, a central question for many folks has been, what do we have instead of police? And obviously we don't need to have a one-to-one replacement for every function that police currently engage in. There are many things that could be addressed just by leaving people alone or meeting basic needs. But often there is a question of how we offer folks support instead of policing and punishment. And sometimes that question is answered in a slogan, for instance, like treatment, not punishment, or caseworkers, not cops, or public health approaches to policing. And it's become clear from experience and from organizing that we really need to recognize that police are not the only people who engage in policing and criminalization, and that we need to be vigilant that we don't end up replacing police with policing in new forms. So I'm joined today as your moderator by people who have been making that case for a very long time from many different vantage points. And we'll hear from each of them about how policing beyond the cops manifests in their field of struggle, what an understanding of soft policing gives us in terms of shaping our understanding, our vision and demands, and ways that we can really resist soft policing. So I'm not going to introduce everyone. You can check out their bios in the chat as they come on. We'll drop them in the chat. And as we jump into the panel, I'm going to ask everyone to introduce and describe themselves in the way that I did. And I, of course, want to kick us off today with my co-conspirator at Interrupting Criminalization and my co-author of No More Police, A Case for Abolition, Mariame Kaba. So Mariame, we start the No Soft Police chapter in No More Police with a comic that you actually created for Project Nia. You co-created it with collaborators that introduces this concept of the soft police. And so wanted to go to you first to help us understand more about what the framing of soft police means and what that looks like in terms of the work you've done over the years.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrea. Hi, everyone. My name is Mariame Kaba. Can you hear me? Yeah. I have a photo up, and on that photo, I'm a brown skin Black woman. I'm wearing glasses and a head wrap and a multicolored jacket. I am here from Lenape land in Manhattan. And I am really happy to join you all today. Thank you, Andrea, for corralling this unwieldy group together. Really appreciate that. And good afternoon and good evening, depending on where you all are. I'm really glad to be joining today. I'm honored, honestly, to be part of this group of brilliant touchstones who are here alongside, because I've learned so much from each of them and in their work as well. So the concept of soft policing, I think you've seen, there's a link to the comic in the chat, and the comic basically says against soft policing. And it asks the question, are cops the only people who do the work of policing? It also offers some context, and I'll go back to this about kind of where the word police was first used, because that's really important. And then talking about kind of, have you ever been policed by somebody who's an official who wasn't a cop, asking people to think about that. There's an image of someone who is a social worker who's kind of giving people a thing about taking a drug test in order to remain in transitional housing as a form of policing. Thinking about, could we reimagine doctors, social workers, teachers, and others in a quote unquote helping professions in ways that actually break their connection to policing. So it's a very short piece. I made it with my friend and comrade, Dr. Brendan McQuaid, and I'll talk a little bit more about Brendan in a second. And this was just our attempt to try to distill what we meant when we were talking about soft police and soft policing. I'm sorry, you're going to hear a little notification that will come up. I can't turn it off. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, hopefully it won't be too distracting. So the concept of soft policing was initially applied to what some of you understand to be what we call community and neighborhood policing. That's kind of where the concept of soft policing emerged in police culture literature. And in that literature, it has been theorized as what they call the so-called non-coercive elements of policing. The non-coercive elements of policing. If you read No More Police, you know we don't think there are non-coercive elements of policing, but that's what the literature suggests. Some of that non-coercive supposed element would be like community engagement. Here's a quote from somebody who is a writer about this, Innes, spelled I-N-N-E-S, publishing in 2005. And it says and suggests that soft power policing is where, quote unquote, police power is based less upon the direct enactment of coercion and rests instead upon a persuasive mode of social control. So it mostly focuses on the ways that the proponents of that philosophy imagine that the cops are partnering with communities in a more cooperative, problem-solving, and purportedly polite way, right? And they've also called soft policing reassurance policing in the kind of academic literature. In No More Police, Andrea and I argue that we need to address the broader question of policing and not just the police as an institution. And we really suggest that policing extends to the family regulation system, a term that was gifted to us by Dr. Roberts, who you'll hear from later. It includes policing through probation, parole, policing through healthcare, through schooling, through the public welfare services. We make that case in the chapter, No Soft Police, in the actual book, No More Police. And I think that's really important kind of to think about. When Andrea mentioned the graphic that we included in the book, I mentioned that I co-created that with my friend, Dr. Brendan McQuaid, who really was absolutely indispensable to us in the writing of No More Police, because he read many drafts. He offered lots of suggested reading and his own analysis. And I think we couldn't have gotten that chapter where it was without his support and help, and other people as well. Vicky, who's here, Maya, other people who reviewed this, Mimi, other people who are on this call. So I think I want to say the following things to end. First, the broader idea of soft policing isn't primarily concerned with law. I think that's really important to kind of name and put out on the table. Soft policing focuses on, as I tried to mention at the beginning, this concept of politeness, the concept of hygiene, the concept of order. And that means that you can be quote unquote policed by all sorts of officials for all sorts of things that are unrelated to quote unquote crime per se, right? That's what's so expansive about this notion of soft policing. For example, a caseworker telling someone that they can't get their benefits because they haven't applied for enough jobs this month is a way to think about soft policing. But perhaps that's not something you thought about as a form of policing, but it is. It is in fact a form of policing. And it makes a lot of sense that it would be a form of policing. What does that mean? Brendan's work, Neil Cleus's work, Tyler Wall's work, and many other people illustrate to us that law enforcement are not the only kind of police, actually, right? So this goes back now to the point that we made in the graphic about when police comes into being, the notion and the word police come into being. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. That policing has a deeper history than most people acknowledge, because the term was first used in the 15th century as part of kind of an elite discussion concerning how the rising states of Europe could promote commerce and encourage people to work for the wage instead of living a life of subsistence. This is when the term police comes into being. This is very important because people talk a lot about police and capitalism and those things coming together. But if you have to understand the discussion of what they were terming at the time, quote unquote, police science, was one of the primary ways that the work of administering a government was talked about until the early 19th century. And during this time, police meant what you now and I understand to be policy. We would call policy police. That's what that connection is there. So police encompassed various things like administrative science, public health, urban planning. And much of social policy today still carries the basis of that old police science. You see the connections there? Right? So soft police isn't like just something we invented in 1996, right? It's actually co-constitutive of the rise of the notion of police in Europe at the very least. So the abiding concern really was the protection of private property. It was the creation of markets. It was the regulation of poverty. It was the separation of the worthy and deserving poor from the quote undeserving criminal element. Right? This is why so many people's experiences with, for example, sometimes public education, sometimes social welfare agencies can feel so oppressive because social policy is not designed to help all people equally. It's actually a police project to fabricate order and pacify the population. So, long story short, we have to be really careful not to get caught up in the expansion of the soft social police. In the book, we argue that we don't want people to think that because armed, uniformed or plainclothes cops are undesirable, that the soft social police are desirable in contrast. We don't think that's actually true. And if you understand that history that I just went through in 2 minutes, right? You understand why we have to break that apart, why we have to break the so-called helping professions and policy apart from police. That's kind of the long story short of this part of the conversation. I hope that makes a little bit of sense to you all. And if that's not, if that's something that's of interest to you, definitely read Brendan's work. Definitely read Mark Neocleus's work in particular, who does a lot of deeply, I'll put in the chat a link to that, and that's there. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mariame, for a master class in 7 minutes on police over time. We'll come back to you to hear how you think we can imagine a society without soft policing after the break. Want to also point out that Interrupting Criminalization particularly works at looking at criminalization through the lens of the experiences of women, queer, and trans people. And we often argue that it's much easier to see soft policing when we examine criminalization through that lens. So I'm going to pass now to Vicky because Victoria Law and Maya Chenwar in their book, Prison by Any Other Name, pick up on this concept of soft police and run with it to examine common proposals to reform the criminal punishment system. So Vicky, where do you see substitution of soft policing for more conventional policing in that context?
Oh, in so many places. Yes. So first, my name is Victoria or Vicky. I am talking to you from Lenape territory as well of New York City. Short description, I am a light-skinned Asian woman with long black hair, wearing pink or red glasses sometimes. I may squint at you because these are dollar store glasses. And I'm sitting in front of a red wall and a bookcase filled with books about abolition, including Andrea and Mariame's books. So we see soft policing happening in so many different areas of society. It is most it is most obvious in some of the proposed diversions or replacements to prisons and incarceration, like mental health treatment or drug treatment that is mandated by the courts or the police or other systems. We see this with the ways in which mental health providers often require patients to take medications that they may or may not want to take, or may have some qualms about, or may have had bad experiences or bad side effects with. And we also see this with the ways that drug companies have been jumping on the bandwagon to refine their drugs. In 2017, the FDA approved something called Abilify Mysite to treat bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. And they somehow, and I do not know because I'm not a biochemist, figured out a way that this drug could actually track usage. So mental health providers didn't have to rely on the patient self-reporting that they were not taking their medications, but this drug apparently could track whether or not it was people were adhering to the medication regimen that they had been prescribed. We also see this in the ways in which people are sent, sometimes against their will, or sometimes when they enter voluntarily and then are held against their will in drug treatment centers or psychiatric facilities. And oftentimes, healthcare professionals or medical professionals become police in and of themselves, and they police people's behaviors, which are not dangerous. They're not harming anyone, but they somehow seem to be deviating from what people perceive as normal. And Mariame talked earlier about how self-policing really was to keep the flow of commerce going. So behaviors that might end up somehow interfering with capitalist production. Like if you are too sad, if you are too angry, if you are, feeling too, like behaving in ways in which you would not be a good capitalist worker or would interfere with good capitalist production. These were all ways that were not quite criminalized, but treated as if the person, were somehow off and needed to be corrected. And these are ways in which people can end up being policed. Other ways are social workers and the child welfare system, as Dorothy Roberts has been warning us for decades. And this is also turned into ways in which social workers and others end up policing sex workers or people who, again, deviate from gender norms, so and can be perceived and criminalized as sex workers. We see this happening in schools, and we also see this in policing when people either need access to services or seek access to services. Mariame talked about drug testing to keep housing, but we also see this when people apply for welfare benefits or when people apply for state subsidized childcare. They have to prove that they have children. They have to prove that they are trying why they need childcare. And there are set restrictions. I remember when my daughter was a baby applying for state subsidized childcare, and I was told no because I was in college, and that did not qualify me for state subsidized childcare. I needed to go work at McDonald's or something full-time in order to qualify to be able to put my child in their daycare. We see this when people are seeking housing. We see this when people are seeking even victim compensation. If you do not conform to the ways in which these systems say you need to conform, like cooperating with police and prosecution, or having a job of this type, or fitting these criteria, you are then denied these services. So we see soft policing creep into so much of society, not just the things that we see as people with badges and guns who can lock you up.
Thank you so much, Victoria. We're going to come back to you to talk about how folks are resisting soft policing in diversion programs, which you talk a lot about in Prison by Any Other Name and in all the other ways you just described. And you mentioned, both you and Mariame, the family policing system. And I want to invite the legendary Dorothy Roberts to the screen, who has not only been a teacher for me and Mariame for decades, but also stepped in early on in the 2020 uprising jumped into the debate as people were talking about defunding and divesting from policing to say, hold up, don't go this way. Don't go down this hallway of the family regulation system. And so in her new book, Torn Apart, she's really helped us understand how that system operates. So I just wanted to ask you, Professor Roberts, to give us the 5-minute version of how you understand the family regulation system to be engaged in soft policing.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrea. It's just so wonderful to be in everyone's presence here with so many people who've been fighting against these various forms of soft policing. I'm Dorothy. I am wearing a brown sweater. I have on a necklace made of some kind of stone, and I wear my hair in locks. I have bluish glasses, tan-ish skin, and I'm another one speaking from Lenape land outside of Philadelphia today. I use she, her pronouns. So I was very alarmed during the rebellions of 2000, that summer of 2020, summer 2020, when I heard some people arguing that money divested from police departments should go into health and human services departments or child welfare departments. And I think there wasn't enough awareness of how so-called child protective services operates as a form of policing. In fact, I've come to call it a family policing system now, even more than a family regulation system, because I think policing captures what it does the best. It operates as a way of monitoring, surveilling, regulating, controlling, and punishing marginalized communities. And I'll say a little bit about which communities, because in the United States, Black and Indigenous communities have always been targeted the most and continue to be today, but it can be used as a way of controlling and punishing other groups as well. People with disabilities have been targets. And recently in Texas, Governor Abbott has deployed caseworkers to investigate the families of trans children as a way of regulating, punishing, suppressing that community. So it can be used in multiple ways. And so it operates like cops. It polices people. It also works with cops. So police officers are mandated reporters. They're some of the main reporters of child maltreatment, and they often accompany caseworkers in homes to terrorize families. And they operate with the same kind of carceral logics. So I was very taken by Mariame's explanation about what soft policing is, and thinking about it, the idea to contrast coercion with persuasive modes of social control, is thinking, how does this system fit into that? Because it's very coercive. That's part of the reason why I call it a policing system, because it operates by threatening families that it will take their children from them. It does not have any way of operating besides that. That's how the family policing system works. It doesn't provide anything without the threat that will take your children away or take the children away. And what it provides doesn't meet the needs of families. So it's fundamentally about coercing people to comply with mandates, state mandates, by threatening to take their children or take their children. But it also operates in this persuasive mode of social control, because it has this fake veneer that it's benevolent and it's protecting children and supporting families. And in a way, it has persuaded many people in the public that it is a softer way of dealing with families' problems than the police. So it's an interesting, I have to think about this more. I don't have time now in my 5 minutes, but to think about this entanglement of the most brutal coercion. We'll take your children, or we come in and we take them. And this way of pretending that it's persuading people to be better parents. So it operates by investigating, surveilling through a network of mandated reporters, including caseworkers and social workers, including police, but also teachers and doctors and social service providers. And that's one of the aspects of this soft form of policing, is that it enlists, deputizes so many people who are supposed to be providing services and turns them into agents of the state to threaten, terrorize, and punish people. And that's one of the reasons we have to abolish it. It can't be fixed because its very fundamental design is to turn people who would be providing care and support into agents of punishment and surveillance. And that surveillance is massive. It's broader than the surveillance of police. Half of Black children in America will undergo a child welfare investigation by the time they turn 18. This is one of the powers of it. So when Mariame said, it's unrelated to crime, but it's more expansive than accusing people of crime. And yet it gets less scrutiny. It gives the police greater power because they can go along and say, we're protecting children, and then violate what rights we're supposed to have. Of course, they violate them anyway, but there is this idea that we shouldn't have any rights at all when the state comes to investigate child maltreatment. They have, caseworkers have more power and less scrutiny. They regulate communities without the need to even convict people of crimes. It's extremely powerful. And the cars, I want to end with the carceral logic, because I think this is so important. It operates on a logic that blames the people who are suffering the most from structural inequities, from racial capitalism, by defining neglect as poverty, or poverty as neglect. Most of the children taken from their families and investigated are investigated on grounds that their parents have neglected them, which means they haven't provided for their needs. And the reason they haven't provided for their needs is because of structural inequalities. And yes, it pacifies populations. It pacifies them both by suppressing rebellions, like the way that the US government used child removal to suppress rebellions by native tribes, by indigenous people, by deliberate military policy. We can also look at how children were taken away and foster care expanded as a backlash to the civil rights movement. And I mentioned Governor Abbott's use of this weapon to attack families of transgender children. But more broadly, it pretends that the state is dealing with the needs of children by taking them away from their parents who are blamed for not meeting their needs. And that is a powerful way of resisting social change, of pretending that we don't need radical social change. All we need to do is take children who are needy from their parents, and that's the answer. So I'll end there, biting my tongue because I want to relate this to the Supreme Court's solution for compelled pregnancy as adoption, but I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you so much.
For
For
another
the,
webinar.
exactly, a teaser
Yeah.
to follow everything Dr. Roberts has to say.
Yeah.
We'll come back to you before you have to leave, before the break, to talk about what abolishing that system might look like. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Gonna bring Cameron Rasmussen and Mimi Kim to the screen now as folks who also similarly jumped in early in 2020 to publish interventions in the conversation around defund and divest from policing, cautioning about what Vicky and Professor Roberts have alluded to in terms of carceral social work. So tell us, Mimi, I guess we're coming to you first, how calls for counselors, not cops, potentially lead us right into a trap of policing in different and potentially expanded forms.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm going to really focus in on counseling as it's represented by a field that I'm very familiar with, and you've been hearing about a lot in terms of carceral feminism and the anti-violence field. The reason being that even though not everybody that's working in domestic violence or sexual assault or a shelter or crisis line considers themselves a social worker, certainly I think that a lot of social work claims to be the anti-violence field or sector as part of its own, and has been a strong conservatizing force within the anti-violence sector field since probably since its beginning in this contemporary form in the mid 1970s to 1980s. I want to say that it's kind of interesting because so many people that are now consider themselves to be abolitionist feminists have been really coming from the field itself and have been making the critique for a long, long time, and especially since I'd say the start of Insight in 2000. So we have 23 years of really persistent, unending, and rising critique of a field, and you would think then at this time that there would be a change. There has been a change, and I also want to talk about a little bit of a different aspect about how there's been this influence on the field due to this kind of persistent recognition of the intersection between state violence and interpersonal violence led by abolitionist feminists. And so many different people that consider themselves social workers or anti-violence workers who have opened up by saying, oh, come to our next conference, talk about this. We're really interested in transformative justice. And why is it that after all of these years, there are so very few that have actually been able to let go of carceral feminism or let go of this tie to the police, despite this kind of understanding of the critique and some kind of a desire to make a change, but an inability to even imagine what that change could be. So yes, some of it is because of the money. So much of the money is tied to the Department of Justice, to the Violence Against Women Act, and the coercive force of the state to say, well, no, you have to do it this way. You have to actually work and show evidence of working with police or victim witness or some other kind of carceral involved institution to get your money. Yes, that is true. But I do have people that are coming up to me and saying, and hearing now time and time again now about abolition, transformative justice, and saying, but I work with so many Black women that say, no, they want better policing. And when you talk more about it, what you find is, of course, if somebody does call the police, or if somebody else calls the police and the police come, you want to be treated well. You don't want to have the fear that violence is going to be inflicted against you. You want somebody to actually respond. But my question then is, did you ask about anything else? Did you ask what else somebody would have wanted other than the police? Most people only call the police or want the police because they can't imagine that there's another kind of response that anybody would even legitimate or that anybody could even imagine at this point. So this is the way, one of the huge ways in which it seems like there would be a somewhat simple answer. Why don't you ask people what else there could be? And if you do, an entire world that looks a lot more like abolition opens up. But there is that refusal and that inability even to ask that question that leads to this persistence of the self-police, of self-policing, and the kind of the idea that we have to hang on to this kind of carceral approach because that's what people want. And I just want to bring up one other thing that's happening now, because I think this is, again, something that you talk about in the book so well. And that is the ways in which, again, abolitionist feminism and abolitionists, particularly since summer of 2020, have insisted on something alternative. Restorative justice is one of those things that has been called upon in looking at domestic violence and sexual violence as a possibility that could be non-carceral. What has actually happened? I may have, it's not surprising, but I think when you look at the actual experience of how this rolls out, I have been working with a program in Northern California that has had an explicitly non-carceral, non-policing restorative justice approach to look at collective ways in responding to violence without the police and really without services. What has happened is that the very county that they've been working in and that actually went in front of the county board and talked about the program ended up saying, oh, we love restorative justice. We're going to fund a project where all of you who want to train police and the district attorneys, come on. That's the entirety of money was only for training police and district attorneys to look at restorative justice as an option. Statewide in California, we just had an RFP come out for restorative justice, looking at domestic violence and sexual violence. The RFP is only for people that work with prosecution. So we can see over and over again how something opens up to actually counter the kind of what people are increasingly recognizing as soft policing, or not even soft policing, hard policing at times, and how this effort has been really co-opted continuously by the state.
Thank you, Mimi. Over to you, Cameron, if you have anything you want to add to that about carceral social work.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cameron. I use he, him pronouns. I am zooming in from Lenape land in Manhattan. I'm a white man with brown hair and a black shirt and a blurred background. And I have to say, it is an incredible honor to be included tonight and talking with Mimi and Andrea and Mariame and so many of the people who have taught me. And I'm literally here because of Mimi, and I read Mimi's work in 2013, and it changed how I understood social work and how I understood the relationship between criminalization and social work. And if you're wondering why I'm here, which I was wondering myself a little bit, I'm here in part because of some writing I've done around sort of social work and criminalization and abolition, and in part around organizing that I've been involved with around social work and criminalization and abolition for almost 10 years now. And I'll share a little bit of that evolution because I think it's helpful, and then a little bit about some writing that I did. But in 2015, a group of us in New York City got together to challenge police violence, and we were called Social Workers Against Criminalization. And Cassandra Frederic, who some of you know, was involved in that. And our analysis at the time was about criminalization and punishment and incarceration, not about carceral social work and not about abolition. And I think abolition was in the background, but it wasn't a present framework for us. And so we were trying to organize around this lens of anti-criminalization. We had a lot of ideas, not a lot of capacity. It sort of folded. In between 2015 and 2020, lots of sort of scholarship and organizing was happening. People like Mimi and Beth Ritchie and others offered us this idea of carceral social work, which again, sort of for me, changed how I understood social work's direct partnership with law enforcement, the carceral logics that were ever present in most of social work. And so in 2020, when the uprisings were happening, many of us started talking. Social work was being sort of offered as an alternative to police, and it was in mainstream news on MSNBC. The president of the National Association of Social Work went on MSNBC and said, "We want more partnership with police. We have their back, they have ours." It's sort of a line I'll never forget. And many of us were like, this is not the answer. This is like missing the point entirely. Not only does it sort of increase direct partnership between social work and law enforcement, it misses that the carceral logics that run through social work. And part of what we were saying in that piece was we have to reckon with social work, carceral social work, and that abolition might be able to offer social work something of a better way to move and to practice. And I know we're going to talk more about that later. I think that just one other thing I'll add, which is or two things. Your chapter is incredible, and anyone connected to social work should be reading this chapter. I think I reread it yesterday and I was like, yes, yes, and yes. I think this idea of someone else and somewhere else feels so critical, and that like if we're just moving these same ideas to someone else and somewhere else, we are missing the point. I think that another thing that like as a core learning of mine is about where we center the problems, and many of these proposals continue to center the problems on individuals and not the systems and structures and ideologies that are actually the problem. So I will end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron, for bringing us to how neoliberalism shapes our understanding of problems and solutions, and how carceral social work plays a role in that. We'll come back to you all on how to do abolitionist social work after the break. And there's some links in the chat to point people in that direction. I'm gonna invite Erica Woodland to the screen now. We've talked a lot about sort of how the medical system is being substituted, and we've also heard many calls for treatment, not punishment, or public health-based approaches to public safety. And in the recently released, hot off the presses, go get your copy now, Healing Justice Lineages, you and co-author Kara Page call on us to move beyond those understandings and to understand because of the policing in the medical industrial complex. So can you break down for us in 5 minutes how soft policing plays out in both the medical industrial complex and public health system?
Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Erica Woodland. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm currently based in Baltimore, the land of the Piscataway. I am a Black transmasculine person. I have long locks, and I'm wearing a plaid shirt with some gold and brown and blue. And I'm in my office, which has gray walls, and there is a wooden screen to one side. I think the thing that's really central to this conversation is that any care or helping profession that comes from the state, we have to understand that it's rooted in criminalization and in deep, deep histories and legacies of colonization, attempted genocide, and enslavement. And I actually think it's critical that we start there, because then we can understand how calls for treatment, not punishment, will actually not get us where we need to be. When we uphold treatment instead of punishment, it really just reinforces the role of health, mental health, and public health practitioners as soft police. It gives more power to these roles, which are already deeply intertwined with the carceral care apparatus. And it's particularly dangerous because a lot of us see ourselves as being helpful, see ourselves as being rooted in radical care. But when we don't have a clear analysis of our role as gatekeepers, as agents of social control and of criminalization, it actually makes it more difficult to politicize and organize practitioners towards abolition. And so any form of care that robs people of choice, agency, power, self-determination, or dignity really moves us away from abolition. And what we know is that criminalization is going to continue to shapeshift. It's just going to find another place to live and hide out from us. And so a lot of the examples of how these carceral logics live in the medical industrial complex and the public health systems have been named, but just to highlight a few, when we're thinking about forced hospitalization and psychiatric detention, in particular, mental health crisis interventions that are calling for social workers to go out instead of police, but at the end, we're still incarcerating folks in psych hospitals. When we think about things like mandated reporting, residential treatment programs, I also want to lift up the particular kind of gatekeeping that is happening around gender affirming care for trans and gender nonconforming folks. Anytime someone like me has the power to write a letter to say, yes, you get access to a thing or you don't, that is a very important example of soft policing. I also want to lift up and name just the process of diagnosing people and the immense digital documentation trails that follow all of us when we interface with either the public health system or the medical industrial complex. And these records follow people and they have very serious consequences. So a lot of times in my work, especially when I'm supervising practitioners in the field of mental health, we're really clear that we know these things are going to follow people, right? And so there are always ways to intervene, but a lot of times we don't understand the long-term consequences, right? I mean, when we shift our attention more clearly to the public health surveillance apparatus, anytime we are using a disease model to make sense of our health and well-being, we've already made a really huge mistake, because a disease model is really rooted in ideas of health, which are deeply ableist, which are deeply rooted in white supremacy and all systems of oppression. When we look at HIV/AIDS criminalization and really holding up people as vectors of disease, as y'all beautifully pointed out in the chapter, and even this kind of move to use a public health approach towards gun violence. Again, it just disappears long-term structural issues and really puts it on an individual or on an individual community. So the pieces that are most concerning to me in the work that I'm holding down is really thinking about the ways that practitioners are really empowered to label and manufacture deserving clients or patients who have to give up their autonomy and dignity in exchange for care, right, that they are entitled to. And on the other side of that, we're often asked to label folks as non-compliant or undeserving, which we know leads to denial of care, but also further criminalization and violence. So as we move towards abolishing soft policing and all forms of policing, it's really, really important that we understand this history and that we understand the ways that the state and state violence are really central to our role. And if you look at this history at the origin of this country, all you have is more and more examples of what not to do. But what I'm really excited about with this book and with this conversation is lifting up all the ways that folks are intervening.
Thank you so much, Erica. We're going to hear more from you about all what our healing justice lineages point us to in terms of those interventions after the break. So grateful for this book and your work. Going to bring Leah-Lakshmi to the screen. Her book, The Future is Disabled, makes the case for centering disability justice in our vision for abolitionist futures. And definitely soft policing, as we've been describing it, as regulating individual as a problem in relation to their productivity, has ableism at its core, and disability justice helps us see that. So can you please help us see more of that in the 5-minute version of your book?
Always. Hi, everybody. My name is Leah-Lakshmi Piepzna-Samarasinha. I'm a light-skinned, mixed-race Sri Lankan and white non-binary femme in my 40s, and I've got purple and brown curly hair, a crop top that reads, thank God for abortion, and purple lipstick. And I'm coming to you from Pocumtuck, P-O-C-U-M-T-U-C, territories in Western Massachusetts. I want to start off by saying that no disabled person is surprised at soft policing's impact on our communities, because disabled people, and I use a broad definition of disability that encompasses physical disability, chronic illness, madness/mental illness, neurodivergence, and deafness and being hard of hearing. One of our primary locuses of struggle is that we are always fighting against either being killed or being locked up. We see that hard policing, we know that 50% of Black and brown people who are murdered are also deaf, disabled, neurodivergent, et cetera, right? We're murdered at the intersection of racism and ableism. And when the state can't kill us, it wants to put us in institutions, right? And some people might not be aware of the Olmstead decision, O-L-M-S-T-E-A-D. This was a legal decision that was fought for by Black Southern disabled people. I want to lift up the name of Lois Curtis, who died in the past year. She's a Black Southern woman who had developmental and intellectual disabilities, who was institutionalized from the age of 12. And she was one of the main plaintiffs who successfully fought this decision, which brought the right that is less than 25 years old of deaf people and disabled people to live outside of institutions. And ever since Olmsted has passed, the state has fought to get rid of that because they were afraid of what happens when disabled people get to live in our own homes and have autonomy and control over our lives. So you've got that, you've got the way, and there's always this language of there are some people who cannot care for themselves. And the state and institutions are going to step in to quote unquote, help the handicapped, right? Like, because we are a problem to be fixed. And I also want to bring in the idea of the ugly laws, which some people may know of. So late 19th century, early 20th century, you've got masses of poor houseless people on the streets, many of whom are disabled. And these laws are passed that say that some people are literally too disabled to be in public. And let's fast forward 100 years to 2 months ago. And you've got Mayor Eric Adams of New York City saying that he is pushing for laws that will take the supposedly seriously mentally ill homeless people and force them into institutions for their own good. And he literally says that the public does not want to see crazy people. And my friend Tina Zavitsanos, Zavitsanos, has started making these posters that say crazy people are the public, because we are. And we know that this is not an accident. We know that the state is afraid of people who are on the streets and who are in public who are not normative. And they are using this to get us off the streets to crush dissent. And so many disabled and neurodivergent people have said that, you know what? Okay, so you want to lock us up? There's actually no psych wards open, so we're going to go to Rikers. Right? And we know what happens to people who are in Rikers. And this is not new. There's been organizing since I've been an organizer against forced treatment, against community treatment orders. And the crux of it is that there's this idea that disabled people are there to be helped. We are not there to have autonomy, power, and control over ourselves. And I want to end by saying, as many people, including Dr. Sami Schock, the author of Black Disability Politics, has said, we're not when people say the disabled community, I think it's really important to say that at least 20 to 40% of the world is disabled. And we're on track to be a majority disabled world very soon, if we're not already, with long COVID. So as Talila Lewis says, you do not have to be disabled to experience ableism. And when they come for us, they come for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. We're going to hear some of the ways in which you imagine shifting the dialogue after the break. So grateful to you for being here. I'm going to ask Maria Fernandez from Advancement Project to join us. People have been asking about soft policing in schools in the chat, and I'm so glad we have you here to answer questions about how you see soft policing happening in the context of education.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. Maria, I use she, her pronouns. I am a light-skinned Black woman with curly hair. I have bomb red glasses, and I am wearing my Police Free Schools t-shirt from the national campaign. And my background is my partner and my library of books with all the incredible books from so amazing authors that I'm able to share space with today. Thank you so much for bringing me into this conversation. I think I first want to start by naming that already most people believe that school police are a softer, gentler, youth-appropriate form of policing, that somehow the cops in our schools are different or better than the police occupying our neighborhoods, and we must disavow ourselves from that belief and that lie that we are told by cities, by school districts, by police departments, and organizations like the National Association of School Resource Officers. I'm taking hits or taking shots today I mean, even the name school resource officers has us believing that they bring resources, when in fact, the only thing they bring into our schools and communities are violence. And that the same police killing us in the streets are the same police abusing and killing Black young people of color across all different intersections in our schools. Most people remember the assault at Spring Valley. You highlighted it in your book. So the Alliance for Educational Justice has been tracking and documenting school police violence since then. And we released a report in December together with AEJ and the Advancement Project, where we looked at and tracked 285 incidents of school police violence, what we call assault acts. And the data is what we know. 80% of the students and the young people assaulted by school police were Black. Most frequent type of assault is a combination of all kinds of police violence, from body slamming, punching, tasing, etc. And that sexual assault is the fourth most frequent kind of assault that is happening in schools by school police officers. And we often see these videos that go viral of Black girls being assaulted by school police. And those are not isolated incidences. The data that we released demonstrate that Black girls represent nearly a third. That's 30.7% of all school police assaults. And pre-COVID, before school shut down, we saw one school police assault a week. For the school year. So once a week, a young person, particularly a young person of color, is being assaulted by a school police officer. When schools reopened a year later, even though the pandemic is still here and alive and well, we saw that number increase drastically. And that's just the data that is reported. But more specifically to your question about why we moved away from frameworks like counselors, not cops, is that for us in the national campaign for police-free schools, that's the organizations on the ground that are organizing in communities, the Alliance for Educational Justice and Advancement Project, we understand that the function of policing is carried out by different adults in the building with different titles, what we call carceral actors, and through other mechanisms beyond just the physical cop. And I'm going to talk really briefly about just a few, starting with teachers. Educators are the gateway to the school to prison pipeline. We know that educators make explicit decisions around criminalization of students and who they criminalize and for what. In 2018, the Black Organizing Project in Oakland released findings that from 2015 to 2018, Oakland school staff called the cops on Black children 6,000 times. That's 6,000 times a school staff, educator called the cops on Black children. In December, ProPublica released a similar story around Illinois schools, particularly a school that has young people with disabilities that they call the cops daily. And I question often why the teachers unions are saying Black Lives Matter at school and participating in the week of action when they're actually not challenging the educators in the classroom that are making decisions. Really quickly, I think there was plenty of conversation around social workers. Just want to name that the National Association of School Counselors also sided with police during the uprisings, and that too often responses to young people who have mental health needs are carceral. We see that with the Baker Act in Florida, that's replicated across the country, where it uses involuntary confinement at a greater rate than anywhere else. And the use of truancy and wellness checks and mandatory reporting that work tandem with police departments. And then I just want to end by saying that this concept of policies, as Mariame spoke earlier, we see that in school districts with discipline codes, the use of suspensions, isolations, restraints, the use of corporal punishment. All are forms of policing based again in domination and control. They police how young people speak, how they express themselves, their identity, how young people dress, how young people move in and out of classrooms and hallways. Young people are taught that they do not have any bodily autonomy. And much of this is gendered. So just want to name that, and I'll talk later a little bit about all the incredible organizing that's happening on the ground, but know that these carceral actors are alive and well, and they take the form of educators, they take the form of counselors, of social workers, they take the form of administrators, and our fight for police-free schools is about something larger than the current iteration of how education and schooling is done in this country.
Whew. Thank you so much, Maria. We're going to hear more after the break from everyone about how they see struggles to eliminate soft policing, but Dr. Roberts has to jet. So we're going to give her the closing part for this first part of the panel to tell us how she sees abolishing the family regulation system. We'll take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back for the rest of the program.
Oh, thank you so much. And please call me Dorothy, but also I'm sorry, I'm going to have to split very soon, and I appreciate this opportunity to kind of jump in before the break. So, so much of how I and others I'm organizing with see the abolition of the family policing system mirrors what others have been talking about and the basic principles of abolition. So we have to dismantle this system. A lot of people resist the idea. They think it's not possible to keep children safe without child protection services. And it's really a challenge to get people to understand that this system makes children less safe, that it makes it harder for family caregivers to take care of their children. So that's something that education that we need to get people to see, that dismantling it is not dangerous for children. It's safer for children while we build the replacement at the same time of this system, according to a vision that is very much like the vision others have been talking about, a vision of society and communities where we don't punish people for having needs, where we actually meet people's human needs, including the needs that people who care for children need to care for their children. It also means, as Mimi Kim and Erica Woodland pointed out, disconnecting from carceral systems. And others pointed this out as well. I think this has been a theme, but we cannot have mandated reporting, period. It needs to be abolished. Social workers cannot work for this system and think they're going to be able to care for families. So we need abolitionist social work, but more broadly, ending mandated reporting altogether. Some other things that organizers like JMAC for Families, and I'm going to try to slow down. I'm sorry. I know I'm talking too quickly. JMAC for Families, Movement for Family Power, and others. Those two are two New York abolitionist organizations. Repealing laws like the Adoption Safe Families Act that speeds up termination of parental rights, prioritizes terminating parental rights instead of keeping families together. More family defense. From the beginning of a child welfare investigation, informing family caregivers of their rights not to let government agents in their homes. No more drug testing in hospitals of pregnant people and newborns, which is a pathway into this system. And then for building up the replacement right now, mutual aid, community-based mutual aid, which has been shown to be more effective than child protective services in keeping children safe. That was proven during the COVID pandemic in New York when they shut down basically the caseworkers going into people's homes, and people were predicting, oh, children are going to be abused. Actually, no, there's no evidence whatsoever of any increase, if not evidence of more safety. And a big part of that was the outpouring of mutual aid in New York City during the lockdown. And then finally, I'll mention what Mimi Kim raised up, transformative justice. Yes, there is violence in homes. Yes, we need to deal with the violence. prevented as much as possible. But carceral approaches, including Child Protective Services, do the opposite. People who are surviving domestic violence are afraid to get any help because they know their kids will be taken from them. It is a deterrent to safety for children. And so we need disconnected from the police, disconnected from family policing systems to develop and actually implement transformative justice approaches, which are far better at preventing violence, getting to the roots of violence, and protecting children and other family members in our homes. So I'll end with that. There's lots more. I'm sorry I can't participate and hear from others, but I'm just so grateful to be part of this conversation. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for being here, and you will always be Professor Roberts to me, and for putting out this vision of abolition, which we will take up in other sectors after the break, of how we end soft policing and build the society we want. Thank you so much for being here. Everyone else, we will take a 10-minute break. You just heard a lot about soft policing. We'll take a 10-minute break, absorb it, and then come back to hear about how folks are fighting soft policing in each of the remaining areas. So we'll see you back at 55 minutes after the hour where you are.
I've been thinking about you late night. I've been thinking only of you. Ain't nothing else to really talk about. Boy, show me what you want to do. These days you been feeling like, yeah, I've been feeling lonely too. I'ma fuck it out once you show me some. Run it back like you owe me some. Perfect love. Tell me how you think without the drugs. Maybe I just need to send for me. I'm here relay. I'm here to care about you. I'm here relay. I'm here to care about you no more. I'm here to care about you no more. I'm here to care about you no more. getting busy with the force, like haha, laugh cause we good, that's a cool namatata. Bet you wanna see a black woman get active whenever they chat shit. I just say nada, free from the BS I was carrying the weight, being stuck up in the matrix. It's a rat race, giving them my truth and they gave us blackface. Why you wanna make a mockery of my pain? Way too long we've been carrying the shame. If we knew we had magic, would we put needles in our veins? That's setting us a lie shit. Keep us low, then we get high quick. And it done change. I was down and out, had my bank account untamed. Trusting other people, billing every call made. Everybody here getting money off my name. Irony is I'm the only one not getting paid. You've been tanning in the sun, so now I'ma throw shade. I probably paid for your bone main. Know you're good at selling me the nigga dream. 1M might just make a nigga scream. Nigga, we made it. Give me equity if you about it. We been here climbing these mountains, trekking through the rain. Ownership is the only conversation we can have. Taking the throne back, you shouldn't have got attached. No mercy. No. Free the birds, toppings a bag, hella diamonds in a stash. Currency and cash, put the bullshit in the trash. Niggas riding out, got the Bible on the dash. Gotta do everything you can to prevent us from a crash. You know that I'm unapologetically black. I can see it make you nervous here, you ain't gotta act. I'm a human landmine, I am not a human being, you can gaslight. If the contract more than 2 pages, a bad sign. I was convinced it was fine, it's my damn time. 16, calling America on a landline. Thank God that my brother kept the flashlight. Needed guidance through the dark, I know sad times, I know good hearts, you is bad mind. Everything is archived, I can never be stopped. Can't get through to me, you see that you being blocked. No mercy. Don't get lost in the sauce when he talk. Take your time, be sure. They want you rushing life decisions over a 3-course meal. Next thing you know, you're doing free tours. I can put you on game, power in your name. The minute you sell that, everything is gonna change. What would happen if you bought into their vision? And what would happen if you put your people in positions? You ain't in the studio with me but want commission. And if I wanna release my art, I need permission. There's hidden agendas here we should unpack. Forgive me if I'm yacked, I'm just genuinely baffed. Please don't ever say your soul was a trap. They want me talking a line, but I put it in my raps. Looks like I'm the only one spitting facts. I'm finally free now, they hoping I'll relapse. No mercy. No mercy.
Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for sticking with us through this incredible Lollapalooza-like lineup of folks who are organizing towards abolition of soft policing. You heard from Dorothy Roberts, her vision of how to accomplish that in the with respect to the family policing system. I'm going to go back through the panelists in reversed order and ask Maria to tell us more about your vision of police-free schools, free of all the carceral actors that you mentioned.
Thank you so much. Again, Maria, she, her pronouns. I think for us at the National Campaign for Police-Free Schools in 2019, prior to the pandemic, 20 organizations gathered in Baltimore to define what police-free schools was. We had already started to see the co-opting by school districts and came up with this definition. Police-free schools means dismantling school policing infrastructure, culture, and practice. So again, not just the physical removal of the cop, but all the ways in which young people and families coming into schools are policed and criminalized. Ending school militarization and surveillance, right, which is another form of quote unquote soft policing, but it's really hard policing, and building a new liberatory education system. And for us, we know that fundamentally it's about shrinking the power and presence of police and returning that power to be able to define what school safety, what school culture, what wellness and safety look like for young people and families, back to young people, back to Black youth, queer and trans young people, Indigenous youth, students with disabilities and their families, to be able to define that. So it's about a fight around community control. And again, it's about trying to lead with a vision for education that's liberatory. And I think we situate the fight for police-free schools as part of a long legacy of abolitionist organizing and as a long legacy of revolutionary struggle, and that young people are at the catalyst, or the catalysts are the center of that. So we like to believe that in order for us to actually get real safety, in order for us to get police-free schools, in order for us to get soft police-free schools, that our work actually is about fundamentally ending the relationship that school districts have with police and building an education system and a system of schooling that is uprooting the function of schools in this country, which within itself is a function of policing. I think more specifically, the National Campaign for Police-Free Schools is comprised of youth organizers and families and communities that are organizing across the country. And this question around mental health has risen up to the top as a particular place that we want to make certain interventions in, as I think we heard time and time again. And we're working around developing abolitionist mental health and wellness in the context of schools. So when we say abolitionist mental health and wellness, we're rejecting all the carceral and punitive forms of mental health response and really requiring models that center the wellness and care and community care of communities and young people, and that eliminate the criminalizing of youth behavior, and that it establishes a process for young people to create and lead their own visions for healing and safety. And I just want to name that I think what Mimi Kim said around restorative justice feels important, because we're at a conversation around whether or not we can repair or have justice in an education system grounded in colonization and slavery. And I think this question of what does safety actually look like? How do we foster community? How do we center young people and families? How do we have conflict be generative is actually where our campaign is going this year. So we're excited about the work. And again, Police-Free Schools absolutely is centered around community control and a vision of education for the sake of liberation. So I have much more to say, but you could go to Police-Free Schools and follow all the incredible organizing that young people and families are doing on the ground.
Thank you so much, Maria. Check out the work for Police-Free Schools, follow Alliance for Educational Justice on social media, and get in your local area. Gonna bring Leah-Lakshmi back to the screen. We talked about how disability justice helps, you closed out by helping us understand how disability justice helps us steer clear of soft policing, and you write so much about cultures and practices of care. So what is a collective vision of care without policing?
Okay, so let me see if I can do this. I just dropped a Google Doc in the link that I want everyone to copy and take home, which is this mega document of a lot of different organizing initiatives and tools that are created by radical, crazy people. Because I just want to say that we already have the solutions. And what a lot of people, including on the abled and sane left, do not know is that there is 50+ years of organizing by mad and crazy people on behalf of our own lives. So what does the future look like? It looks like shit that's already here, but that's underfunded and underrecognized. And I just dropped it. Maybe somebody else could drop it. Hold on, let me just do this again. Thank you for whoever just dropped it. Thank you. So it looks like peer respite centers. It looks like the small but growing number of warm lines where you can call if you're having a hard time and you can talk to somebody, including someone who's been there, and they're not going to call emergency services to SWAT team your house. It also looks like all of us unpacking our internalized ableism and sanism so that we're not thinking of being crazy or disabled as a fate worse than death or something that has to be fixed in ourselves or in other people. It means practicing figuring out how to support ourselves and each other in crisis and just indifference. One thing I do want to lift up, I'm doing good on time. I really want to end conservatorship law. And one thing I didn't get a chance to talk about in my first 5 minutes was just how fucked up conservatorship and mental health law is, which some people on this call absolutely know. And a lot of people don't because of the way it's hidden. I think that some people in the public sphere know more about it now because of Britney Spears, which is great. But there's a lot of us who are not Britney Spears, who are like Black, brown, poor, trans, all of it, who are deeply affected by guardianship and conservatorship laws that are so far-reaching and so fucked up. And I mean, I'm just going to name that I'm somebody who, as a young childhood sexual abuse survivor, was threatened with conservatorship by my parents when I was like, hey, could we talk about this? They were like, you need to come home. You're sick and we're going to get you help. And in the past year, my mother, who was in late stage dementia, ended up being under conservatorship. And I ran into, not by me, and I ran into how powerful those laws are in taking away the control of your right to control your healthcare, your money, your life. And when I was like, can I challenge this? My lawyer was like, do you have $60,000? And I was like, I do not. So that is one real place where we can fight to end conservatorship laws. And there's so much rhetoric out there about how we need somebody else to care for us and that, you know, oh, maybe I don't, but then there are the really crazy people who do. And the fact is that we all, you know, at one point somebody in the court was like, do you think your mom can live on her own? And I was like, not in this world, in this system where Massachusetts state healthcare will not pay for in-home care. But in a revolutionary world, of course she could live in her home and her garden that she loved for 30 years in Worcester, Massachusetts. We just need a system that'll pay for it. We need that care revolution yesterday. And I have 33 seconds. Please, if you take anything out of this, start practicing this now. Learn how to actively listen. Learn from the resources that I put in that link, like Carly Boyce's Suicide Prevention for Your Friends Who Sometimes Maybe Want to Die, about how to be there for each other when we struggle with suicidality. We are at a time where a lot of people are having a really hard time. And the system really doesn't work and is being marshaled by the state to lock us up. And we're not everything, but we can do something to hold each other and be there for each other. And that's my 4 minutes.
You are amazing, Leah-Lakshmi. Thank you for all that you have shared, both in the chat, in your writing, and today. And everyone just go get everything Leah's ever written, not just the latest, but also care work and other writings. Erica, wanted to ask you, I mean, this beautiful book you've just written doesn't as much paint the problem as point us to the solution in our healing justice lineages or multiplicity of solutions. So tell us how we can turn to those to eliminate soft policing, particularly in the mental health field that you've been talking about, but across the board.
Absolutely. One of the pieces that we really looked up in the book is that we're part of a lineage, right? And that it's actually a relatively recent phenomenon that we are over relying on the state to take care of our people. So what we hope to seed is to just remind folks that there's lessons and wisdom to draw from. The book really asks the question, how did our people heal from trauma, from violence, from grief, and from crisis before the state? And when we think about some of the historical examples, like the Lincoln Detox Center, started by the Young Lords and the Black Panthers, or the Panther survival programs, we know that our folks have always had to take care of each other. And one of the things I so appreciate about what Leah-Lakshmi just lifted up is that our communities have robust ecosystems of care that are core to our survival and core to our liberation. And when you think about our emotional and spiritual care and mental health support, the majority of that care is happening outside of the system. So how do we remind folks of that reality while also working to organize practitioners to no longer be complicit in harm and violence? So the other piece that's so amazing about the book is that we have a lot of examples of inside-outside strategies, folks who are thinking about this work in new ways and old ways, and remixing strategies that our ancestors have used. I want to lift up two of the projects that my co-conspirator, Kara Page, is a part of, Changing Frequencies and Healing Histories project, because both of these projects really help to name, acknowledge, and help practitioners think about ways to disrupt their involvement in the medical industrial complex. Shout out to practitioner networks such as the Latinx Therapist Action Network, my organization, the National Queer and Trans Therapists of Color Network. Again, our not so secret agenda is to actually engage in political development with practitioners and to help them see themselves in their right role in movement. Also want to shout out the work that's being held down by the Fire Week Collective, Mental Health First in Oakland and Sacramento. There's tons and tons of examples and so many in that document that Leah-Lakshmi dropped for us, but to just remind us that we have to reclaim our radical imagination, right? Our people have been doing this forever, and we will continue to take care of each other. And so as we think about eliminating soft police, what we have to know is that we have to do that elimination internally first, because that's the default, and that's ongoing work, and it requires us to be in community with each other and to be in conversations like this.
Thank you so much, Erica, for pointing us to the soft police within ourselves and the ways in which we also engage in this notion of policing people to a normal that we have internalized from capitalism, and how we need to participate in that as well. And certainly those of us who are practitioners definitely need to check out the Changing Frequencies website, which I think Sheila is about to drop in the chat, your network's website, and also invite folks to check out Interrupting Criminalization's Beyond Do No Harm network, which Erica is a critical part of, which invites practitioners to really think about and interrupt the ways in which we engage in policing, whether we're being forced to by the state or by our profession or just by our own actions. So thank you so much, Erica, for all you've brought to all of that. And please thank Kara Page in our name for her incredible contribution as well. I appreciate you both and the work you're pointing us to. All right, I'm going to come to our abolitionist social workers, Mimi Kim and Cameron Rasmussen, to tell us about how you're building an abolitionist social work framework.
Yeah, hi again, everyone. I'm going to start actually by sort of talking about a book that Mimi and I are working on, as I think that helps set the stage, and I'm also going to set a timer for myself. So we haven't really shared this publicly, but Mimi, myself, and our colleague Darrell Washington are the editors of a book tentatively titled Abolitionist Social Work, Possibilities, Paradox, and Praxis. And I think the point of the book, much of what Erica said, I think, translates to some of what I think we're hoping to do in the book with a different orientation. But I think the purpose of the book is to answer these questions of what is abolitionist social work, and is it even possible? We brought together a pretty incredible group of thinkers, of activists, organizers, scholars, social workers, to grapple with these questions, including the question of like whether social work should be abolished and whether this term is the right term to be using. There's a shouting out Cassandra Frederick twice. Cassandra has written a chapter called "Is Social Work Obsolete?" sort of riffing off of Angela Davis's work. One thought I would share is that I wonder about whether the term abolitionist social work is a distraction from the sort of rigorous debate that I think we're hoping that will happen from this. The question of what is it, I think in its simplest form, is about bringing abolitionist politics and principles to social work practice. And then when we think about doing that, we're immediately faced with sort of the reality that social work's existence, at least the mainstream, professional, majority white social work, has existed to keep racial capitalism in place and has been a sort of very strong partner of the carceral state. And so the book is grappling not only with what's possible by naming sort of and bringing together these ideas, but also all of the paradoxes or some of the paradoxes that come up in trying to do so. I think, there's a chapter in the book written by the Network to Advance Abolitionist Social Work that's trying to think through some of what makes up an abolitionist social work. And I should say that if social work is going to have a role in the sort of future that we're trying to build, it must be radically remade. And there's a question about whether that's possible. I think some of us see that it could be possible, and so working through that. And it brings up also questions that Andrea, you and Mariame have thought about in terms of what's the relationship to the state and what do we want from the state. The chapter from the NAASW is sort of trying to offer some porous scaffolding about sort of guiding principles for bringing abolitionist politics and practice to social work. Some of those are about being anti-carceral, which I think includes ending direct partnerships with law enforcement, which is sort of low-hanging fruit, but an immense undertaking for social work to actually do, given how enmeshed social work is in these systems. It's about eliminating the logics of the carceral logics and the soft policing, which Erica sort of noted is like both a deeply internal and deeply material endeavor. I think the last thing I will share, two things I'll share. One is that it's more than being anti-carceral, and there's a lot in the chapter about that. And then two, there's a framework that you all have lifted up about sort of against the state, beyond the state, and in and around the state. And I had originally sort of thought that was from Gramsci, and I'm learning from you all that there's many different origins to that framework. But I have found it a very helpful framework to think about where we bring abolition into social work and where social work can enjoin efforts against the state, where social work can be supportive of work happening completely outside of the state, and to the sort of most fraught and difficult part about social work in and around the state, which I think is quite fraught and not as easy to bring abolitionist principles to. So I will stop there and turn it over to Mimi.
Thank you. I just want to begin by describing myself, and I apologize for not doing that at the beginning, so I will a little bit awkwardly do this at the end. Mimi Kim, she, her, and I am an older Asian woman with black hair, silver hoop earrings, wearing a black dress, and I have a blurred background so that nobody can see the mess that's behind me. I just want to say that this question of abolition and social work, I didn't even put those words together until 3 years ago, I'd say. As somebody who has been in the abolitionist world for a long time, I think I entered social work a little later in life and saw my abolitionist work as being very peripheral to outside of the work that I did within social work. And it was something that I've struggled with. I have a lot more hope now, of course, working on this book and seeing the wonderful pieces that we've put together to cobble together what we can see as an abolitionist social work or something that we might call something different. I love the call to the term care and an opening to what that means. And I think that's going to be a really important question for those of us. And so many, I am also teaching now. So many students who are Black and Brown students, BIPOC students, who are from poor communities, who are first generation, first people going to school, that they come to social work as something that they think represents actual social change. a betterment of their community, of their lives. And as they're hearing more about abolition, whether it's from me or just from the world, I can see the eyes lighting up. I have to say, this morning, I taught this morning, and I brought the book with me. And you know, just some people actually knew about the book. I shared it with other people. I told them about this webinar and kind of opened them to a world that some of them did not know about before. I sent Leah-Lakshmi's link to one of my students who I know is really interested in the soft policing and is very interested in countering that in the mental health field. So I can see the promise, and every day more and more, where I'm having this kind of exchange and interface with students who are actually demanding that we teach them about abolition. That is something that did not happen before. It is something that's happening now. And I have to say that the promise I see is something that I honestly couldn't have imagined just a couple of years ago. So again, names, what we call it isn't important to me. I think what's important is the politic behind it and the action and change that comes from it.
Thank you, Mimi. And I just want to lift up that the reason that you are a central part of the reason that people are now clamoring to be taught abolition, not just in social work school, but everywhere else. And I know it's been a long slog and hard game for you. And I just really want to lift that up and celebrate that with you. You have helped us see soft policing and resist it for many decades. So thank you to all the panelists, but particularly want to lift you up on that front. And also thank you, Cameron, for talking about the abolition in the state discussion tool. Just drop that in the chat. All right, folks, we're going to hear from Victoria Law about how to resist soft policing in the sort of more traditional areas of criminal punishment reform. And then Mariame Kaba is going to close us out with her vision for a society free of soft policing, or at least some ideas of how to get there. So stick with us. We're almost there. Take it away, Vicky.
Sure. So I think that one of the things we need to think about when we're thinking about changes to the criminal punishment system is that you can't just change the system without actually radically changing the society that created it. So only looking at hard policing, imprisonment, incarceration, without looking at a society, the society that has created it gives us soft policing. Only looking at soft policing in a vacuum, again, without looking at all of the underlying reasons that people are soft policed, will give us, I don't know, softer policing. I'm not sure what comes after that, but let us not find out. So, you know, Leah talked about, you know, the fact that her mother, you know, was put into, you know, a care facility rather than being able to be rather than being able to stay in her home and her garden that she loved. And one of the things I think has gotten more attention recently, Mariame tweeted out a piece about this. There's another piece in The Nation, is this idea of a guaranteed universal basic income. And it's very modest right now. There are pilot projects that do this in some small county in Florida that Mariame tweeted about. 115 formerly incarcerated people got, you know, like got $1,000 for 1 month and then $600 for the next 11 months. Los Angeles was more expansive. 3,200 people got $1,000 a month for a year. And this was funded by diverting a few tens of millions of dollars from police budgets. I'm just going to put the links to both in the chat. The LAPD budget as of last year was $1.9 billion. So if more funds were diverted, how many more people could get financial economic help in this capitalist system that we work in? And it wouldn't just be the people who are the poorest or the most financially desperate, but it could be people who need that boost to be able to stay in their homes. And that needs to be coupled with, and I don't know if this would fall under policing, somehow making housing accessible, affordable, and or free and guaranteed to everyone, so that way you don't get money that immediately goes and lines a landlord or a property manager's pocket. So if we could have something that takes care of people's needs, we could actually cut out much of this soft policing, softer policing that is going to happen around people's behaviors when they need basic necessities. And then we can think about, what community safety looks like. And Mimi Kim has this amazing toolkit called the Creative Interventions Toolkit, which outlines ways in which people have reacted and responded to harm, violence, and also harm that is not necessarily physical violence or things that we think of as violence, without calling in police or soft police. And one of the amazing things about the toolkit is that it understands that not everybody has the same situation. So what works for me is not maybe going to work for Andrea. What is going to work for Andrea may not work for Mimi, et cetera, et cetera. But it gives us ideas about this. One of the other panelists talked about like our poverty of imagination. Like we can't think past policing. We have soft police in our head. We have hard police in our head. But it gives us, glimpses of what else could we have that is not some form of policing, and so part of that is developing community safety. A small thing everyone on this call could do is getting to know your neighbors and people around you. You don't have to like them. You don't have to have them over at your house every night for dinner. You don't have to hang out with them, but you can get to know them so that way, if you need something or if they need something, there is somebody right there that you can call that is not a 911 dispatcher. And also you can distinguish, well, what is that scream from my next door neighbor's apartment? Perhaps they are having a mental health episode and they are fine. Perhaps they are having loud S&M sex and that is also fine. I don't need to call 911. Or maybe this is something that does need some attention and maybe I can rally all the other neighbors to help figure out how to intervene safely and without calling 911. And finally, the pandemic has shown us with pockets of people doing mutual aid is that one of the questions we need to ask is, what do people need? And that answer is going to always be changing. It's not static. What I may need one day might be housing. Once I get housing, maybe what I need is food. Maybe what I need are clothes that fit properly. Maybe what I need is a mental health day away from responsibilities or childcare or, something else. So, figuring out what do people need and ways to meet those needs. But again, also kind of going back to, we live in a capitalist system. Think of how much we could do with $1.9 billion in terms of meeting people's needs. And now multiply that by however many giant police departments and smaller police departments and medium-sized police departments we have, to say like, what kind of changes can we make to the criminal punishment system? We can make vast changes to the society that created this criminal punishment system with the resources that have been perpetually poured into that.
Whew. Thank you, Victoria, for pointing us to what I have learned so much from Mariame about, she'll be mad at me for saying this, but I'm saying anyway, about in terms of the commons. Because if we rewind to the moment that she was talking about where the police, the notion of police as part of the state maintaining racial capitalism was formed by regulating how resources are distributed, how opportunities for safety, well-being, and healing are distributed to foment capitalism. And we go back to the point people it was about meeting needs without eligibility criteria, without policing, and just giving people what they need in the ways that you were just talking about, Vicky. So Mariame, I'm gonna invite you to share with us, your sense of how we undo this society that Vicky was just pointing to and get to a place where there's at least less, if not no soft policing to bring us home.
All right, thanks, Andrea. And thank you so much to everybody that has spoken. I have learned a lot today and had a lot reinforced and have questions to ask and try to find my own responses to. And I hope that's the same for everybody here. Maybe we can all just take a deep breath also. just for a moment it's a lot. It's a lot. And I think sometimes I leave these kinds of conversations where there's so many people saying so many things that are, making my head spin, sometimes feeling overwhelmed. And maybe some of you feel that a bit today. However, so many people that talked today really offered actionable, concrete suggestions, offered resources for you to take back to your communities or to just read yourself and think through and figure out what your responses are yourself from your context and where you are. That's really what this is today. It's like an offering of many people's ideas and an invitation for you to deepen your own work and your own knowledge and your own thinking. And I just want to say a couple of things to me that matter in this moment. Vicki talked about the importance of what we have to do ourselves in our communities, and then what we need to demand from whatever structure we are. Right now, it's the state and the government, and in the future, it might be something else. But Vicki talked about us needing to know our neighbors. And every time I talk about this with people, I just get a lot of, there's a lot of pushback. I don't want to do any of this stuff. I want someone else to take care of this. I'm busy, I'm overwhelmed. I've got a lot of stuff going on. I'm taking care of 3 children. I have a full-time job, so many things. And those are all real, Can't someone else put the problem people somewhere else? And I want to acknowledge the feelings of frustration, the feelings of overwhelm and the difficulty. And sometimes just, that's not your personality. You don't want to do it. You're just like, I don't want to do it. But I want to just point out that policing isn't simply imposed on us. It's also deployed by us. And we are the people. We're the ones who are going to have to make sense of all of this. We're the ones who are going to have to, if the society is going to change, if we're going to shift the conditions that allow for these death-making institutions to do as they do, then we are going to have to change that. We, not just 1 or 2 people, not just a small group of people on the side doing all the heavy lifting, all the work, all the sacrificing for everybody else. We must do it as a community, as a society. We live in a society, even though a lot of people want to act like that's not true. We do. We live in a society. So we're going to have to do work. And that includes the work of figuring out how we're going to take care of each other and ourselves at the same time, without relying on death-making institutions and forms of coercion and control. Critical, really important. Then you hear other people talking today about organizing in all these different ways. And guess what? The reason to be hopeful to me is that there's so much going on, y'all. There's so much going on everywhere. You heard about police-free schools. Plug in, figure out how you can do stuff in your own community there. You heard about collectives that have come up, Fireweed, other people who just figure out how they're going to try to implement non-coercive ways to support people who have mental health needs that come up. You're seeing people organize right now in the Beyond Do No Harm network, where people who are working in healthcare are like, this ain't it. We got to figure something else out. You heard Mimi and Cameron speak to the work they're doing on the ground now, trying to work with social workers. Shira Hassan, who was mentioned earlier, who's a fellow at IC and does work with Just Practice, and Mimi and some other people ran a social work circle last year, where social workers came together to strategize on how to not replicate soft policing, how to, at their level, interrupt, work, do the best they can. All those things to me is the work that we're going to have to do. It is not some plan. Abolition is not a blueprint, even though many people want it to be so. Okay? That is not the case. It is not a blueprint. It is super frustrating to people that that's not the case. You have to get over it. What abolition provides, as Ruth Wilson Gilmore teaches us, it's a theory of change, how we change the conditions in order to bring about the world we want. It's a theory of social life, how we be in relationship with each other. And abolition is about making things at bottom for me. It's about making things together with other people, lots of things. tons of different experiments, trying, failing, trying again. We're not going to get around that, y'all. Not some big thing, not some big theory in the sky is going to drop in and just transform everything. That's not what's going to happen. Abolition is made through process and struggle. Okay, that's the bottom line. And so my vision of the world doesn't matter. That's why I keep getting frustrated about that. My individual vision doesn't matter. I have lots of ideas all the time. I'm constantly making things, new projects, new ways, new connections, new organizations, I'm always doing that with other people. You should do the same and stop getting stuck on thinking about you have to have answers to everything. The limits of reform should not be the reason for why we should be stopping to demand abolitionist solutions that move us closer to freedom. Okay? We're gonna chip away at this thing. Gonna chip away at it, and things do change. Mimi brought this up earlier. Those of us who have been abolitionists for a minute were laughed out of rooms 20, 25 years ago. We're still laughed out of many rooms because it's unpopular to be an abolitionist. But a lot less people are laughing today than they were 25 years ago. And that's because of everybody's input who's been on this call today. Many of you who are here in the room also, that's because of all of us. So I guess I just want to end with that. And that's where we're ending. But I just don't want to think that we're constantly thinking about having to feel like we have to come up with big things all the time. When what you should be doing is working where you are, constantly, iterating, thinking, being discerning, creating tools, figuring out how those tools work. Keep moving. That's our work. So I hope that's what you take away today. Grateful again to Andrea for calling us together. Hope you all will take all these resources that are offered and you'll get to work. Just get to work, y'all. We have a lot to do. Get to work.
Thank you so much, Mariame, for closing us out. If this is the last of the events in the No More Police series, but if you want more inspiration on how to get to work, check out and pre-order Mariame Kaba's new book with Kelly Hayes, Let This Radicalize You. I also will have an offering out for you at the end of this year that makes some similar and different interventions. So let's get to work and start by thanking Victor and Brendan, our ASL interpreters, Annette and Jessica, our Spanish language interpreters, Corvin, our captioner for today, Emily Simmons, our graphic note taker, and Aaron and Sheila, who have been holding us down on tech and links. And of course, check out Interrupting Criminalization to find out more about our work and how you can get in. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here today. Have a great rest of your day.
Greetings, girl, and welcome to my world of phrasing right up to bat. It's the daisy age and you're about to walk top stage, so wipe your lottos on the mat. Hip-hop love this is, and don't mind when I quiz your involvements before the sun. But clear your court, cause this a one-man sport, and who's better for this than plug one? Don't have to worry about me squashing other deals, cause they've already been squished. Freeze the frame of our moves the same, wish we can continue right behind the bush. You'll stay with me, I know this, but not because of all my earthly treasures, or regardless to the fact that I'm past the noose, but because I love you better. May I cut this dance to introduce myself as the chosen one for speak. Let me lay my hand across yours and aim a kiss upon your cheek. The name's Plug 2, and from the soul I bring you the daisy of your choice. May it be filled with a pleasure principle in circumference to my voice. About those other Jennies I reckoned with, lost them all like a homework excuse. This time the magic number is 2, cause it takes 2, not 3 to seduce. My destiny of love is brought to an apex. Sex is a mere molecule in this world of lust that I have for you. It's true, true. I love you better. Now it's time to let this rhyme style get somewhat poured in the mold. Hold my hand, we'll pick my plantation of daisies for a bouquet of soul. So we dip at the cut of a rim. Take it as filled to the rim as in brim. Squeeze your stoop like Betty Boop, then make camel alphabet soup and spell plug ones within. Forward march is the say when transistors will play. Coming to bed is the move. Dolby sound will be thin top crown when I put the needle into your groove. I got a good thing, and in full swing. I show this in gifts, words or letters, but even without those 3, I know you'd be close to me, cuz I know I love you better. It's I again, and the soul that I send is taking steps to reach your heart. Any moment you feel alone, I can fill up your empty part. We can ascend till we reach daylight heaven, and in a spin we'll hit the top 10. Then we could meet Mr. Stucky and Pops Brother Lucky will preach, let the wedding be. Shot by an arrow of Cupid through a string of a G clef, my dear, I claim your death. And if you could hear me, by golly G, true Goy is ready for what you possess. We could live in my plug 2 home, and on Mars where we could be all alone. And we make a song for 2 picture perfect things, and I sing of how I know I love you better.
All right, Grandmaster tech people, was there Zoom bombing? Did anything bad happen?